You had 100 billion chances and ways to have avoided today, but you decided to spill my blood. You forced me into a corner and gave me only one option. The decision was yours. Now you have blood on your hands that will never wash off.
April 16th, 2007. A quiet Monday morning on the campus of Virginia Tech students were hurrying to class, carrying coffee cups and textbooks, unaware that within minutes, the university would become the site of the deadliest school shooting in American history. A lone student, armed with 2 handguns and a lifetime of rage, was about to change everything. This is a story of Seung-Hui Cho and the 32 innocent souls who never made it home. The sun rose over Blacksburg, Virginia, casting a soft golden light across the Virginia Tech campus. It was a Monday, the start of a new week. Students were waking up for class, grabbing breakfast, checking emails, and talking about weekend plans. To them, it was just another ordinary day at one of the nation's top universities. Virginia Tech, home to over 26,000 students, was known for its beautiful architecture, quiet surroundings, and strong sense of community. Spring had arrived, the cherry blossoms were in bloom, and finals were just a few weeks away. No one could have imagined that in just a few hours, this peaceful campus would become a scene of unimaginable horror. Inside the West Ambler Johnston Hall, a co-ed dormitory housing more than 800 students, one of those students was Emily Hilscher, a 19-year-old freshman majoring in animal sciences. Emily was bright, energetic, and loved horseback riding. That morning, she returned to her dorm after spending the weekend with her boyfriend. Moments later, another student, Ryan Clark, a 22-year-old resident advisor and honors biology major, was making his usual rounds, checking on students. At exactly 7:15 a.m., a gunshot shattered the silence of the morning. Then another. 2 students, Emily and Ryan, were found lying in the hallway, both fatally shot. When campus police arrived, the dorm was chaotic. Students peeked out from behind doors, terrified and confused. Was it an accident? A lover's quarrel? Authorities believed it was an isolated domestic dispute, a personal matter gone wrong. With no suspect immediately identified and no sign of further danger, the university decided not to cancel classes. Across campus, thousands of students continued their normal routines. Emails were checked. Lectures began. The echo of the morning's tragedy slowly faded into the background. But while the police were piecing together what they thought was a relationship crime, the real killer, Seung-Hui Cho, a 23-year-old senior English major, was walking freely among them, calm, silent, and planning something far, far worse. Inside his dorm room, Cho changed his clothes, gathered his weapons, and wrote down his final thoughts. He wasn't running from the police. He was preparing for his next move. The clock kept ticking. The world went on as normal, and no one knew that the most devastating part of this story hadn't even begun. He changed his clothes into a gray vest and dark outfit. He loaded his 2 handguns, a 9mm Glock 19 and a .22 caliber Walther P22, and filled his backpack with extra ammunition, totaling hundreds of rounds. Each bullet marked a life he was about to destroy. At 8 a.m., while police were still interviewing witnesses at West Ambler Johnston Hall, Cho calmly walked to a nearby post office. There, he mailed a package addressed to NBC News in New York, a disturbing collection of photos, writings, and video clips that he'd spent weeks preparing. It was his manifesto. In his twisted mind, this package was his message to the world, his justification. In one of his recordings, he referred to himself as a martyr, comparing himself to Jesus Christ and the Columbine shooters, whom he called brothers in arms. After mailing the package, Cho walked back toward the heart of the campus. He passed students laughing, couples holding hands, professors heading to lectures. No one noticed him. He looked just like any other student, a quiet face in a crowd of thousands. At around 9 a.m., he approached Norris Hall, the building that housed engineering and language classes. He carried a backpack that looked heavy but ordinary. Inside were his guns, 15 magazines, chains, locks, and a deadly plan. Once inside Norris Hall, Cho began locking the main entrances with thick metal chains and padlocks. He even taped a note to one of the doors, warning that if police tried to enter, the building would explode A cool diversion meant to delay their response. By 9:40 a.m., the traps were set, the hallways were silent, and behind those locked doors, hundreds of students were taking their morning classes, unaware that they were sealed inside a death trap. In less than 1 minute, the second wave would begin. At that exact moment, Seung-Hui Cho pulled out his two handguns, a 9mm Glock 19 and a .22 Walther P22, and began his rampage. His first shots echoed through the hallways like thunder. Students in nearby rooms froze. Some thought it was construction noise, others thought it was a prank. But within seconds, the horror became clear. He moved from room to room, shooting through doors and walls, targeting anyone in sight. Each classroom became a trap, a desperate fight for survival. In room 206, Professor G.V. Loganathan was teaching civil engineering. Before anyone could react, he was shot dead instantly, followed by 9 of his students. Only a handful managed to survive by hiding under desks or playing dead. Across the hall, in room 207, the students heard the gunfire getting closer. Panic broke out. They pushed tables against the door as Cho tried to force his way in. He shot through the door, bullets tearing through the desks and hitting several students hiding behind them. In room 205, 76-year-old Professor Liviu Librescu, a Holocaust survivor, realized what was happening. As Cho tried to enter, Librescu held the door shut with his entire body, using all his strength to block it while his students climbed out the windows one by one. He saved nearly all of them. When Cho finally forced the door open, Librescu was shot through the door, but his bravery gave his class enough time to live. Outside, chaos erupted. Police arrived at the building within minutes but found the doors chained and barricaded. They tried to break them down with shotguns and bolt cutters, while gunfire echoed from inside. In just 11 minutes, Cho fired more than 170 rounds. 30 people were killed inside Norris Hall, professors, students, engineers, and linguists. Dozens more were injured. As officers finally made their way inside, the gunfire suddenly stopped. At 9:51 a.m., they found Cho dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. On the floor beside him lay hundreds of shell casings and 2 empty handguns. The entire attack lasted less than 12 minutes, but it left 32 innocent people dead. Some were only weeks away from graduating. Some had families waiting to hear from them, calls that would never come. When police cleared the building, the hallways were lined with backpacks, textbooks, and blood. The smell of gunpowder still hung in the air. It was over, but for the survivors, it was only the beginning of a lifetime of trauma. To understand the tragedy at Virginia Tech, we must look into the mind of the man who caused it. Who was Seung-Hui Cho? And how did a quiet, awkward boy transform into one of the deadliest school shooters in American history? Seung-Hui Cho was born on January 18, 1984, in South Korea. He was shy, distant, even as a child. His family moved to the United States when he was 8 years old, hoping for a better life. They settled in Centerville, Virginia, where his parents ran a small dry cleaning business. Teachers noticed something was off. He rarely spoke, avoided eye contact, and spent most of his time alone. When asked to read aloud in class, his voice was so soft that classmates could barely hear him. Some called him the mute kid. Others just ignored him. By middle school, Cho had been diagnosed with selective mutism and severe social anxiety disorder. He was put into therapy and received special education support. But as years passed, his silence deepened into something darker, resentment. He began writing disturbing essays, stories filled with violence, revenge, and death. One teacher described his work as the most grotesque thing I've ever read. Another said she feared he might hurt someone someday. When Cho entered Virginia Tech in 2003, things seemed stable at first. He majored in English, quiet, polite, invisible. But behind his calm surface, his world was collapsing. He began stalking 2 female students on campus. Police were called. He was briefly detained and ordered to undergo psychiatric evaluation. The doctor declared him mentally ill and in need of hospitalization. But because he wasn't deemed an imminent threat, he was released. In 2006, Cho purchased his first handgun, a Glock 19, followed by a Walther P22 a few weeks later. Both were bought legally. Background checks cleared him. No one connected the dot between his past and what was coming. Alone in his dorm room, he began recording videos, hundreds of them, rants filled with hatred toward what he called rich kids and debauchery. He referred to himself as the martyr and spoke about cleansing the world of evil. His delusion had become his purpose. You forced me into a corner and gave me only one option. You had 100 billion chances to stop me. These were his own words, recorded hours before the massacre.
You had 100 billion chances and ways to have avoided today, but you decided to spill my blood. You forced me into a corner and gave me only one option. The decision was yours. Now you have blood on your hands that will never wash off.
When the footage aired 2 days later, the nation was horrified. In the videos, Cho smirked and pointed his gun at the camera, calling himself a soldier fighting against the world's corruption. But all people saw was a deeply broken young man, consumed by hatred and loneliness. Behind the monster was a student who slipped through every crack, ignored by a system that saw warning signs but never connected them. A child who needed help, and instead found silence. By the time anyone realized how far he'd fallen, it was already too late. 32 lives were gone, and the name Seung-Hui Cho would forever be etched into the dark history of American tragedy. Sometimes, the most dangerous people aren't the loudest. They're the ones no one ever hears. 18 years have passed since that morning at Virginia Tech. Yet, the echoes of gunfire still haunt classrooms across America. After the deadliest school shooting in U.S. history, the world promised never again, but never again became again and again. Sandy Hook, 2012. Parkland, 2018. Uvalde, 2022. Each time, the same grief, the same outrage, and the same unanswered question, why does this keep happening? The Virginia Tech massacre was supposed to change everything. It exposed flaws in the mental health system, background checks, and school safety. It forced America to talk about gun control and mental illness in the same sentence. But somewhere between the politics, the media noise, and the endless arguments, the real message got lost. Seung-Hui Cho was not the first student to be failed by the system, and he wasn't the last. Since 2007, over 400 school shootings have occurred across the United States, each with its own warning signs, each with its own shattered families. And every time, the nation mourns for a few days before moving on to the next headline.